Therapy Chat Podcast, episode 125.
This is the Therapy Chat Podcast with Laura Reagan, LCSW-C. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. And now, here's your host, Laura Reagan, LCSW-C.
Today's episode is sponsored by Brighter Vision, the worldwide leader in custom website design for therapists. What's the point in having a beautiful website if your ideal clients can't find you? A nice-looking website doesn't equal a successful one. The truth is, your current website may even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of web designers will create you a website that's centered around helping your ideal client find you, so you'll have a nice-looking website that is also a successful one. For $59 a month, you'll get a website that speaks to and attracts your ideal clients, unlimited customer support, and an SEO strategy to help you get found on the search engines. But wait, it gets better. For a limited time only, they're giving my audience 1 month free of their services. To take advantage of a free month of Brighter Vision, go to try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast. That's try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast, where you can get a free month of Brighter Vision services. One last time, that link is try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast, so you can get started on your journey towards a successful website. Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. Today, I have a fascinating interview for you, as always. This time, I'm talking with Loretta Pyles, PhD, a social work professor who has written an amazing book, something that really deeply resonates for me. Her book is called Healing Justice. Loretta Pyles is a professor at the School of Social Welfare at SUNY Albany. She's a co-editor of Holistic Engagement, Transformative Social Work Education in the 21st Century, and author of Progressive Community Organizing, Reflective Practice in a Globalizing World. She's a Kripalu certified yoga instructor, as well as a practitioner and teacher of mindfulness. I think her perspective in her upcoming book, Healing Justice, which is subtitled Holistic Self-Care for Changemakers, coming out next month in April, is really fascinating because it talks about the intersection of social justice and social work practice with the social workers' experience of internalized oppression at the forefront. So I think we had a really interesting discussion. I know I was fascinated by what she had to say. I got to read an advance copy of her book, which is so good. And when you listen to this interview, she's going to have a coupon, a discount code for you at the end. So be sure to listen to our discussion and then grab that coupon code. It's also in the show notes. All right, let's go ahead and get started with my interview with Loretta Pyles, PhD. Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. Today, I am very honored to have a guest from UAlbany. Dr. Loretta Pyles is a professor at the School of Social Welfare, a longtime meditator and yoga teacher, and a fellow social worker who has a book coming out in March 2018 called Healing Justice. Dr. Pyles, thank you so much for being on Therapy Chat today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
I'm really excited to talk to you. I heard about your book, oddly, through Twitter, and I looked up what it was about, and I just thought, wow, the connection between self-care and, social justice and oppression is something that totally makes sense, but yet I never really put those two things together. And I'm really excited to have you have the chance to talk to us about that more. But first, can we just start off? Will you tell us more about yourself and your work?
Sure, definitely. So I can say a little bit of maybe about how I came to this work and some of the things that sort of has influenced me up to this point. I was working in the 90s in the domestic violence field. I was working, really on the front lines. I was doing direct service, but I was also, doing grant writing and community work, and was busy, stressed out doing that work. It would not be uncommon for me to work all day at the shelter, go in the evening to do a training or go defend a grant at City Hall, and then actually take the crisis line overnight. So that was like the kind of, life I was living, and all of my colleagues were doing the same. Needless to say, that was pretty unsustainable, and, found myself getting really burnt out. I really, at that time, did not have any healthy coping skills to speak of. And so I eventually found my way to some other work, but I started meditating eventually. And I started to see the connections between my meditation work and sort of the efficacy of my social work practice. And so I started to get really curious about this connection between like personal change and social change. And so that for me has been kind of a guiding sort of light really for the last 20 plus years in my work, this connection between, you could even call it personal healing and community healing. And then as I started, getting into academia and being a professor, I also kind of was getting pretty burnt out on that too. The academic path can be one of pretty high stress kind of situation, and so I was burning the candle at both ends with that too. And eventually, once I got tenure, I was still meditating during this time, but I started to get more serious about yoga and started to do some more deeper healing work of my own, some more personal kinds of work. And I had this sense that I really wanted to be more integrated between these parts of myself that was into yoga and meditation and healing, and yet this academic self, this social work self, this public self, and how could I integrate all of these parts together? And so one day I got brave and I had my students meditate at the beginning of class. And that was sort of the beginning for me of starting to integrate this together. And, the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to hate this. I'm going to get fired. This isn't working. And but I stuck with it, and the students really love it. They really appreciate, 5 minutes of quiet time before class. Every single class I teach since then, no matter what the topic of the course, no matter what the content, we always meditate the first 5 minutes of class. So I thought, well, if I don't teach them anything else, I can at least teach them how to meditate this semester. So that was really the kind of the context for, how I started to come into this work.
That's awesome. And I'm just thinking about people who are in grad school are typically very driven, achievement oriented. The process of gaining tenure as a professor is, I think of it, I'm not a professor, but I think of it from what I've observed as being somewhat like almost like a years long hazing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is. It is kind of like a hazing process. And it's really, I think of academia as a very kind of sort of patriarchal environment. And I started teaching this course several years ago. It's called Mindfulness, Yoga, and Social Work Practice. It used to be called Women, Yoga, and the Body. But so it was really like the first time I started to teach yoga in an academic institution. It already felt to me like sort of this disruption of that patriarchal space, because it's so driven. We're so conditioned to ignore the body. to ignore our emotions, to ignore anything to do with spirit. And, it's all very cognitively focused. And so to me, it always felt like a bit of an act of resistance to like invite people into their bodies to breathe and move. And the students just absolutely love it. They're hungry for it. They need it. They don't take the time in their lives to slow down and just be with themselves.
Exactly. And I would argue even that as grad students, they almost probably feel like they can't slow down and take the time because so many students who are in social work school are working, doing internships where they're not getting paid, juggling their course load, and many people have families. And so it's that feeling of it never stops, you never have a break. And then not to mention the emotional toll that the work of trying to help alleviate the suffering of groups of people who've been disenfranchised and witnessing individual, family, community pain day in and day out and being so earnestly, focused on wanting to make a difference in that. It's intense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a structural issue here. I mean, it's a form of structural injustice in the sense that, some of these students are, some of my students I work at a public university. Some of them are first generation college and graduate students. They're immigrants, they're students of color. They're coming from lower income backgrounds in some cases. And so many of them are working at least half-time, if not full-time, plus, of course, full-time courses, plus 2 days a week, as you said. And, I think it does sort of set them, I think it's an injustice, and it does sort of set them up for, exhaustion down the road right out of the gates. So it's really, I think part of it is a justice issue. And then there's also just, so much rhetoric about self-care. They're hearing that you're supposed to practice self-care, but we're not really creating the conditions within how graduate programs are structured to be able to, make that a reality, let alone actually teaching students self-care skills. And so, of course, that's a big reason why I wrote the book is like, let's actually help students to think through why we're not focusing on self-care. What are the structural injustices at work here in terms of not only, the challenges of facing their own oppression and trauma, but these structural conditions, not only within academia, but within nonprofits and public agencies where self-care is not part of the culture. Help them to think through some of that stuff, and then also to give them actually real skills that focus on them as whole human beings. And so I think, one other point I'll add here is just, and I think you were beginning to allude to that, is just this dissonance that students feel between, their goals and intentions and values and inclinations as to why they got into social work practice in terms of social justice and human dignity and caring and healing on the one hand, but then these environments and organizational structures and cultures that they're working in, not only academia, but in the where their field placements are actually an anathema to some of these these inspirations that they originally had. And so they're seeing, the commodification of social work. They're seeing how outcomes and the bottom line are driving some of the practices, and then they're seeing burnout and cynicism in colleagues as well. That's not the only thing they're seeing. They're also, inspired and have great field instructors and that sort of thing too. But there's just this dissonance there. And of course, I do a lot of like continuing ed type workshops for people who are in the field as well, and do consulting and with organizations, and everyone's feeling this dissonance too. And so this book and my work is really about helping people to be with that dissonance, like cognitively, but also like somatically, emotionally, etc., and to, help people to begin to unwind it a little bit. And again, somatically, emotionally, cognitively, but also structurally in terms of the work that needs to be done within our like organizational environments to make, some of this self-care a reality.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what you just said about being with the dissonance and all the different ways that it shows up really is thought-provoking because, I think about the concept of white fragility and how, when people are confronted with the way that their privilege benefits them, that hurts other people, and how, and they want to say, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I have the right intentions. And it's just like some people feel like it's a choice. Do I have to accept that I am horrible, or do I have to disavow that idea that privilege isn't real, and it becomes that like extreme, and they just can't deal with it, and they kind of shut down. And then, I think that's how white fragility, that's what drives it.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor. And of course, it's quite a literal issue as well in terms of understanding sort of oppression as well. But I think, yeah, we can always do more work around being with ambivalence and confusion and that sort of thing. It's, our mind, one of my meditation teachers says, the mind is always trying to figure things out and the body's always trying to get comfortable. And, that, some things we just can't quite figure out, and some things we just aren't going to be comfortable. And like, can we just be with that?
Right. Like recognizing the system of white supremacy and oppression that our society was built on. And that's not really comfortable once you realize that, but you can either choose to be part of the solution or, shut down and collapse. And I understand why it feels like sometimes there's so much shame in recognizing privilege that it just feels too impossible. But even that, is a privilege. And so how do people, what do you teach your students and in your book about how to get past that dissonance and become more able to sit with it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I just want to say one more point about what you were saying about sort of the white privilege piece and just the sort of the oppression work and the internalized oppression work that I think all of us need to do. If we're talking about sort of the, white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic culture that we're living in, that we're all impacted by, no matter what kind of privileges or not that we have, everyone is impacted by it. We all have both, we all have like subjugated selves and privileged selves. So we're all sort of impacted in different ways by these things. And even when we have a lot of privilege, that these systems are negatively impacting us too. And that, if our missions of our work, of our organizations, of social workers, has some kind of social justice mission, then it seems that, our job is that we should be doing this internal work along the way, that we should be creating spaces in our organizations to attend to this kind of work, in terms of whether we're talking about creating structural and cultural changes within the organization. One of the chapters in the book is called a healing justice organization. And I look to different organizational models, feminist organizational models, contemplative organizational models, sanctuary models, as sort of ways to think about what a healing justice organization might look like. So there are structural things to do, cultural things to do. And, and some of those things might be, creating spaces where we can be with holistically this internalized oppression and reflect on it and talk about it and look at the ways that's impacting the way we work with clients, the way we're treated as workers, what are the disparities within the agency, those kinds of things. So I'm definitely, a big fan of sort of looking at the structural conditions in place and how we can change those. But back to sort of the question of kind of the how, a little bit more about sort of how from a kind of a mind, body, spirit perspective, do we learn to sit with this? This is really, really mindfulness is really the major guiding principle of my work and of this book in particular, and with my work in the community and with students. So, I use that. I use this more somatic ways of knowing. The somatic awareness piece is not only obviously extremely fruitful when people are able to be with that and look at the ways internalized oppression gets locked in the body and the ways in which feelings are present and that sort of thing. But the body is also can be very accessible to people, in terms of just simple movement and being with the body in that way. So I'll leave it at that and see what your next thought is.
Well, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how, using the body as that access point, how does that show up in the work that you're doing, I guess maybe on the individual and possibly in a broader way? Maybe not in the broader way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm either teaching in the classroom or doing workshops, in the community. And so with my work, I'm doing just very simple things like chair yoga or other kinds of simple movements, working with the breath, bringing people back to, just helping people to be with the body in various ways. I could give you an example of one activity that I do with folks. And this would be something that I would do after maybe we've developed a little trust together as a group. And, they've been doing yoga. Like this one class I teach is a 3-hour class. And the first hour of the class, we do yoga. And so I would do this activity, more to the middle or the end of the semester when they've really started to develop some healing around yoga. They've really started, and we've been practicing mindfulness in class as well. They've been working on their own home practice. That's a big part of the class, is for them to develop a home practice and journal about it. And so they've sort of started to attain something. We've got some trust. And so this exercise is called the Healing Through the Dark Emotions exercise. And I get the ideas from Miriam Greenspan's work on healing through the dark emotions. But the idea is just to give them an opportunity to learn about where their emotions are in the body. And so we start on the floor. They're on their mats. They have a blank 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with a blank body map on it, and then some crayons and markers around. And so I start with a guided sort of meditation, just kind of get them, relaxed and into their bodies. And then I bring up a dark emotion. So I bring up a particular emotion, fear, say, and get them to actually sort of connect to an experience of fear and actually to sort of feel that in their body. And I give them cues around, is it, what is the texture? What is the color? Is it still? Is it moving? And so I let them be with that for a few minutes. And then they get up and they draw on the body map, with the crayons, using the textures and anything that they want to draw that on the body map. And then we go through a range of different emotions, grief and despair, etc. And then, they have this body map at the end, and then they share it with each other. And people are just really, kind of amazed at just this real life that these emotions have, just that how embodied they really are. And so that's, I think it's a really powerful exercise for people.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's in a way, I haven't been a social worker for that long, but I got my MSW almost 8 years ago. And like you, I was working in a sexual assault crisis center. Well, I don't know what stage you were in your career, but it was, for me, it was before grad school, before I even finished my bachelor's, and with that 24/7 hotline, on call, backup, all the time, never ended. When my kids were little, the phone would ring and they go, "Oh no, do you have the hotline?" When they were like 5. I'm like, "I'm sorry, guys." But, so I get that perspective, that's part of my background too. But when I graduated, I think my program was pretty heavily CBT based and very much evidence-based practice based. And there wasn't a lot of space for mind, body, and spirit in our classes. It wasn't talked about at all, but they did have a trauma class or something. Maybe, I think it was like a trauma class, but they did yoga all week, and it was a 1 week long class that was in the summer only. But so for you to talk about helping people get connected to where they feel emotion in their bodies is, I think for many therapists and social workers, that's like an advanced clinical skill that you're teaching people right in school that is really a human skill,
Yeah.
that, like you said, we're very disembodied in our culture where we're shut off from our bodies. And then the result is, among other things, we're distracted all the time. We're numbing all the time. We have substance abuse problems and eating disorders and a myriad of problems that go along with being disconnected from our bodies.
Yeah, it's so true. I think, students in general are just, they don't have time to practice self-awareness. They don't have those skills. No one ever taught them how to practice self-awareness. So students come into my class and, have to sit still and be quiet for 5 minutes, and they're just blown away. They didn't even realize that they were just full of anxiety, or, that they're obsessing or whatever it may be, So just to be able to, to know thyself is just so critical. And it's just very highly, connected to their ability to be empathetic and to stay in conscious relationship with somebody else, when we're checking out all the time, or, not even aware that we're checking out and out of our bodies. It's really difficult to really be present with anyone. And it's kind of phenomenal to me that we're not really teaching those skills at very deep of a level in academia. It's pretty phenomenal. But I did want to touch on too, just your point you were making about, the disembodied culture, and sort of how distracted. And, there's more and more evidence that digital technology is really exacerbating this and playing into this, of course, as well as, heightening anxiety and that sort of thing. And Douglas Rushkoff, who's this, he's a kind of a intellectual and scholar around digital technology, but he coined this term called digiphrenia. And digiphrenia is really just this idea that, we're disconnected from real analog lived experience, that the online world is this 24/7 always on world that doesn't mesh with the reality of kind of, the cycles of nature and the realness of a real lived experience. And so this disconnect between the always on 24/7 world of a digital capitalism that's, trying to get us to click and buy things, that is really in conflict with how our bodies actually work and what our bodies actually need. And so I think this is a big big piece of what's going on for folks as well, or it's exacerbating all of these things that have been around for a long time. So, in that regard, I do help students or create spaces for students to reflect on their relationships to technology, because I think that's really important. And the way I articulate it in the book is, how can we cultivate an empowered relationship with technology? I never say no cell phones in the classroom, that I just don't think that really is I just don't think it's an empowering solution to the problem. It's like, okay, you're an adult. Let's take this as an opportunity. Let's get curious. Like, let's just notice, wow, I'm like obsessively looking at my text like every 3 minutes. Like, isn't this interesting? Like, what am I distracting myself from? What's going on here? Do I feel empowered in terms of my relationship, or is there addiction going on here? So really trying to create a space where people can be in the inquiry.
Yeah. There's so many things about the digital culture that we're in now that I'm a parent of 2 college students. And when I look at them and I think about, particularly for my daughter, how cultural messages about femininity and being a woman and our bodies, they're pervasive for men, but I don't know. It seems like it's more subjugating in some way for women that, we know that media tends to reinforce patriarchal norms, and in all ways, not just in gender, but of course, racism and, all the areas of inequality. But I guess, what I was going to say is that, to me, I just think how much harder growing up as a teenager and a young adult, which was so hard for me, but how much harder, exponentially so, it would have been if I were carrying something around with me that was always giving me messages about, in a way, my worthiness as a human.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm really framing mindfulness, mindful awareness, somatic awareness, coming back to the body, coming back to the moment as an act of resistance. So it's an act of resistance in the sense of an act of resistance to, the capitalist algorithms that are preying on us in our Facebook feeds and whatnot. It's so turning that off and coming back to, going out for a walk in the woods, or, wherever it is, connecting to a pet, connecting to a loved one, whatever it is, that is actually an act of resistance in that sense. And, that also just mindfulness in general, and again, somatic awareness, is an act of resistance to, as you say, sort of the patriarchal objectification of the body, particularly, if you're part of a community that has been targeted in terms of your body's objectified, or that if your body has been seen as less than, or it's been targeted for violence, or abuse, whether you're a person of color, whether you're a trans person, if you've been told that your body doesn't look right, or it's not enough, or it's, actually been a target of physical harm, then the idea of like coming back to your body, to loving your body, to having compassion for your body, to develop a loving relationship with your body, that to me, not only is that an intrinsically good thing to do, but, for the social justice minded, you can, also view it as actually an active resistance. And so I'm reminded of the Audre Lorde quote that says, self-care is not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare or something like that. So that's, I think, a little bit where I'm coming from with this idea of healing justice.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's coming to mind for me as we talk about this is that the more you are present, and if you are aware and not in a trance, you see what's really going on and you're like, oh, this isn't okay. This can't be, I can't just ignore this. Whereas if you're just sort of going along, floating, not really aware of what's happening, ignoring your own discomfort, maybe because, I can imagine like when with children who don't know to shut off their bodies because they haven't been conditioned to that yet. And they ask questions then about, well, why is that man why is he sleeping on the street? And the parents are like, oh, just come on, don't look at him, You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you can't ignore those things if you're really present.
Right.
All of the injustice.
Exactly. And it starts with being present in your own body. Like, I think there's definitely a connection between our ability to be empathetic with what's happening in other people's, this is mirror neurons, right? With what's happening in other people's bodies, in relation, like correlated with your capacity to be connected to what's, happening in our own bodies. And of course, we're all conditioned to look outside of ourselves. We look outside of ourselves, to seek out pleasure, to avoid, pain. We're looking to get stimulated in different ways. And this is, in part just how the brain is conditioned. But I think our culture definitely, encourages us to seek satisfaction outside of ourselves. And so that adds to our lack of ability to be with the body. And so, and I think social workers in particular, therapists, counselors, activists, people who are drawn to sort of the helping professions, may tend to be people who are, looking to help others, looking externally, and maybe not so tuned into, their own needs as much. So, the practices, are helpful for everybody, but that's why, I think it's especially useful for helpers.
Yeah. And one of the things you talk about, I just want to add to that. I know you cover this very well in your book, but it's, helping professionals in a very broad sense, because activists and advocates and people who may be volunteers, but are out there just really trying to make change, struggling against so much resistance from the systems of oppression that are in place. The toll is enormous on physical and mental health. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, the secondary trauma and all of that kind of stress as well. Not to mention, low wage, overwork, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, for people who are protesting against inequality just because inequality is wrong, and they may have a part-time job or, a full-time job that's really low paying. I mean, social work field is not a high paid profession, but compared to like a minimum wage job, it's better. And, so just, I think the less personal resources someone has for their own, food, shelter, basic needs, medical care, the more of a toll that this type of work can take. And so I think this book is really important and really, really beautiful, because one thing about meditation, it's free and nobody can take it away from you.
Yeah. And I think that's, all the workshops I teach, every time I'm with a group of people teaching them meditation, that's a big takeaway for people, is just how empowering it is. Like, I did this, I didn't have to pop a pill. I didn't have to, I did a little chair yoga, so I didn't have to guzzle caffeine to get a little more energy, got a little more energy flowing in my body all on my own. And so, the empowering aspect of it, I think, is an important sell for people.
Yeah, you can do it anywhere, anytime. You don't have to ask someone else for permission.
Yeah. And I think another important message of the book is also just sort of, I have a whole chapter just on the natural world, on the natural environment. And so, it's not just, a solo effort, healing justice, right? It's something, well, I have another whole chapter on just like community. So like healing in the context of community and like, interpersonal and other kinds of community-based connections, conscious communication, and all of that sort of thing as, sort of our supportive networks that we have to sort of help us stay resourced. So that's like, I think equally as important. And then as I mentioned, the natural world as well. Our environments, our work environments are so disconnected from the natural world. Like 50% of all workers in the U.S. don't have access to natural light in their workplaces, right? And we know not having natural light is associated with like better kinds of work outcomes, happier, healthier, more productive workers. I was in a workplace recently where the head of the unit would not allow any plants in the workplace. And I can't remember what the reasoning was exactly, but, it was a very sterile kind of environment. And again, sort of, I bring in some of the research on biophilia, just this idea that having more of a connection to the natural world in the built environment can, bring forth lots of more positive outcomes in ourselves as workers. And so having sort of natural elements in our environment. And there are things you can do. There are fixes that can be done that can, enhance that a little bit. I understand that many of us, are working in these, concrete kind of buildings that don't, that aren't like biophilically designed or anything like that. But so, connection to the natural world is another way an important way to resource ourselves. And it's part of this larger vision around like transformative justice and transformative change, if that the work is also in terms of our healing, this larger agenda around transformative justice that, we have to, we're part of the planet's part of us, and that's part of the healing work as well. And I think people are very unaware of just how disconnected they are to sort of the natural rhythms of nature, whether it's the circadian rhythms of being able of like sleeping and eating at appropriate times, going to bed when it gets dark and getting up when the sun rises. Being in more, eating more local foods, all of that kinds of stuff can just bring us in greater alignment with the natural world. And so just helping folks to go through inquiries around, their relationship to the natural world, in my mind is, just as helpful as some of these other practices too.
Yeah, I agree. I think a good way to wrap up our discussion, if you don't mind, I think it would be helpful if you could sort of talk about the way the book is laid out. You sort of alluded to some of the parts, not alluded to, you've talked about some of the parts, but the framework of the book is really cool. And I think many people who are listening are going to be very interested in it. So I'd love if you would sort of tell how it's laid out.
Yeah, definitely. So the book is 3 parts. The first part is sort of introducing the context and the research and sort of my framework and approach, and I can say more about that. And then the second part is I have a chapter on each of kind of the parts of the self, the body, the spirit, etc., and specific inquiries and then specific practices to attend to those parts of the self. And then the last part of the book is really about like bringing it to the front lines, bringing the healing work that you've been doing on yourself to the front lines in the organization, doing indirect practice, and even in the larger kind of global context as well. So that like the first chapter focuses on oppression and trauma and introducing healing justice and the need for it. And then the second chapter, I get into stress and talking about sort of self-care and kind of the self-care revolution and stress reduction and that sort of thing. But also like making a unique point about how the healing justice framework is a little bit different, just in the sense that it's not just this kind of selfish, kind of narcissistic kind of endeavor that we're up to, that our aspirations are a little bit bigger. And then chapter 3, I bring in the whole self, like just bringing in like what are these dimensions of the whole self, drawing on some of the East-West ideas that have guided my work, as well as sort of more like ecological systems type approaches. And then I bring forth in chapter 4 some of the actual skills, begin to introduce the framework for the skills that are going to be offered in the book, which include mindfulness and compassion, curiosity and critical inquiry, and effort and equanimity. And really, these come directly out of Buddhist and yogic teachings. And then as we get into part 2, again, there's a chapter on the body. There's a chapter, that was chapter 5. Chapter 6 is connecting to the mind, heart. 7 is the spirit. 8 is community. And then 9 is cultivating connection between person and planet. And each of these sections have lots of offerings around actual skills, actual practices, actual inquiries. Each chapter has a little section called Experiment for a Day, where you could practice, just try something, explore. And then, as I said, this final part of the book is focuses on the healing justice organization, looking at organizational models and organizational change issues, and then really talking about the front lines, connecting with ideas around boundaries and ways to care for the self as you're involved in practice when you're in the moment. And then finally, this piece around sort of connecting more globally, doing more of the anti-oppression work, connecting with difference, which I think is a lot of the work that we have in front of us as a planet and as a global community in terms of our cultivating our capability to be with difference in a genuine way.
Oh, man. That's wonderful. I mean, really, gosh.
It's a labor of love, that's for sure. That's for sure. It really is like all of my life's work for the last 20 plus years. And so it really is a labor of love.
Well, if you ever wonder if you have made a meaningful contribution to the world, I can tell you, yes, you have.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think, this book is really inspiring and, for us all to know that we can and do make a difference. But what is it? What is that difference that you want to make? Is it positive overall, or is it not so much? And I think with these concepts, we all can be making a difference and making a better world. And, that's needed right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is really that Gandhi quote of be the change you want to see in the world, and, if our organizations, if the way we practice is just perpetuating the status quo, then, you can kind of wonder what the point is, so it's an opportunity to really tune in to process and to really reflect on how you want to be in the world.
I love it. Well, where can people find your wonderful book, Healing Justice?
Oh, yeah. So you can definitely go to my website, which is lorettapyles.com, and there's a book page on there. So you can learn more about it, like all the chapter breakdowns and a little more explanation about it. There's also a place to click. I think that takes you to the Amazon site. It comes out March 14th. Also, you can go to the Oxford University Press page, and I do have a special code for your listeners that will give them 30% off if they go to the Oxford University Press page.
Nice.
So if they go to oup.com and I think it's oup.com/academic and then find my book, Healing Justice by Loretta Pyles, I can give you the code. The code is A as in apple, S as in Sam, F as in fly, L as in Loretta, Y as in yes, Q as in question, 6. So ASFLYQ6. And that'll give folks 30% off the book, which is quite a great deal.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you. ASFLYQ6.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't, I wish it would have been a cute, clever kind of thing, but it's not.
Oh, well, I'll put a link to that site in the show notes and link directly to the page that the book's on so that people can find it and get their 30% off. Thank you for that.
You bet.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on to Therapy Chat today. I loved this conversation. I love your book, the work you're doing, and I want to tell the world about it. So hopefully a lot of people will go out there and read your book and learn from you.
Well, I appreciate it for I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate what you're doing with the podcast, Laura. So thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for listening to my interview with Loretta Pyles today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. It was very thought-provoking for me. She is a really interesting and knowledgeable person, and I'm grateful that she agreed to be on Therapy Chat today. I hope you found our conversation to be thought-provoking. You know, looking at our own privilege and our own internalized oppression it's a task for all of us if we want to make this world a better place. And so I hope this discussion got you thinking. Until next time, thanks for listening to Therapy Chat. Today's episode is sponsored by Brighter Vision, the worldwide leader in custom website design for therapists. What's the point in having a beautiful website if your ideal clients can't find you? A nice-looking website doesn't equal a successful one. The truth is, your current website may even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of web designers will create you a website that's centered around helping your ideal client find you, so you'll have a nice-looking website that is also a successful one. For $59 a month, you'll get a website that speaks to and attracts your ideal clients, unlimited customer support, and an SEO strategy to help you get found on the search engines. But wait, it gets better. For a limited time only, they're giving my audience 1 month free of their services. To take advantage of a free month of Brighter Vision, go to try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast. That's try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast, where you can get a free month of Brighter Vision services. One last time, that link is try.brightervision.com/therapychatpodcast. So you can get started on your journey towards a successful website.
Thank you for listening to Therapy Chat with your host, Laura Reagan, LCSW-C. For more information, please visit therapychatpodcast.com.